Thief. He stole police evidence. The scream tore through the morning air. Karen Douglas stood in my front yard, her face flushed red with fury, gripping the master key that was jammed tight in my front door lock. It was 6 in the morning, and she had just broken into my home under the excuse of a safety inspection. Now she was accusing me of theft. My blood boiled. After 6 long months of enduring this unhinged HOA president, from petty fines to invasive harassment, this was the final straw. She had no idea who she was dealing with. When I first moved into Maplewood Grove, I thought I had finally found peace. The quiet suburban neighborhood seemed perfect, but the moving truck hadn't even left my driveway when a woman appeared at my door, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Mr. Blake Turner," she announced briskly. "I'm the president of the Maplewood Grove Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your compliance with community standards." I was still holding a box labeled tax files, blinking in disbelief. "I just moved in yesterday," I said. "Exactly," she replied, voice sharp as glass. "We need to establish expectations immediately. Your moving truck blocked sight lines for 6 hours. Your lawn shows stress from improper hydration. Your garbage bins are 3 inches outside the designated placement zone." I waited for the joke, but there wasn't one. When I apologized, she gave me a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Successful communities require structure, Mr. Turner. Property values depend on it. Surely you, as a financial professional, understand that." I froze. How did she know I was an accountant? 3 hours later, a 47-page orientation packet arrived, detailing every rule imaginable: lawn height, noise levels, paint colors, parking distances. It read less like community guidelines and more like a manual for control. As I read, the doorbell rang again. This time it was a kind-faced woman in her 70s. "I'm Martha Evans," she said softly. "Welcome to the neighborhood." When I mentioned Karen, her smile faded. "She means well," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "But never challenge her in public. Just pay whatever she asks. It's easier." "What happens if someone doesn't?" I asked. Her eyes darkened. "The Hendersons tried. She fined them for everything, until they sold their home." That night, I reread the HOA packet, uneasy. One clause in small print caught my attention. The board reserves the right to enter any property for safety inspections or compliance verification. I stared at it. Who decided what counted as safety? I didn't know then, but that sentence would become the weapon Karen used to terrorize the neighborhood. A few weeks later, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. The community center was packed. Karen stood at a folding table like a judge ready to sentence her victims. "Effective immediately," she announced, "we're implementing the master key security protocol. All residents must provide spare house keys to the HOA for emergency inspections." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Tom Bradley, a retired Air Force colonel, rose to his feet. "Karen, what's the legal basis for that?" She smiled, sharp as a blade. "County Statute 774B grants us emergency access rights for community protection." I raised my hand. "Can we see that statute?" Every head turned toward me. Karen's voice dripped with venom. "Mr. Turner, perhaps in your previous arrangements, you weren't familiar with how responsible neighborhoods operate." Her supporters laughed. "Questioning safety protocols," she continued, "constitutes disrupting community harmony. That's a $200 fine." I paid it, not because I was guilty, but because I wanted to understand how she operated. She needed to win. Resistance only fed her cruelty. For the next few weeks, I complied with everything. Paid every ridiculous fee. Handed over my spare key. Smiled through every inspection. But I was documenting everything: photos, recordings, notes. And sure enough, the day came when her obsession crossed the line. At 6 a.m. one Monday morning, Karen appeared with 2 board members for a wellness check. They barged into my house, ordering each other like cops on a raid. I followed silently, filming them on my phone. When she demanded access to my locked filing cabinet containing confidential client data, I refused. "That's private tax information," I said. Her smile turned feral. "Refusing inspection suggests you're hiding something. Robert, call 911. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived, looking baffled. "Ma'am," Officer Harris asked, "what's the emergency?" Karen waved her clipboard. "He's concealing materials that endanger the community." The officers exchanged glances. Homeowner associations don't have authority to search private business files, Harris said flatly. This isn't an emergency. It's harassment. Karen's mask cracked. She sputtered about community safety, but it was over. Before leaving, the officer turned to me. Document everything, sir. You have grounds for legal action. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from Morrison and Hale Legal Services, Karen's lawyers. It demanded $8,700 in violations and threatened a property lien if unpaid. I called Michael Pearson, a local attorney. Maplewood Grove again, he said grimly. You're the third this month. She bullies people until they sell. Most just give up. I decided to pay, not because she was right, but because I wanted to see what she'd do next. Sure enough, she held a victory rally in the park that weekend, boasting she'd neutralized a community threat. Her ego blinded her. She had no idea I wasn't just a mild-mannered accountant. I was Detective Blake Turner, County Sheriff's Office, working undercover in a federal task force investigating civil rights violations by abusive HOAs. A week later, Karen's private investigator, Marcus Boyd, showed up for a background check. I let him in, answered every question truthfully, and watched him leave knowing his report would show exactly what I wanted. Spotless record, no criminal history, nothing suspicious. When his report came back clean, I knew Karen's paranoia would explode. People like her can't handle being wrong. That weekend, Tom called me. She's planning something big, he warned. Another inspection. This time she's going to search your entire house while you're gone. Perfect. That was exactly what I wanted. I made sure she'd think I was leaving for good. I packed a visible suitcase, left real estate listings on the counter, made loud phone calls about getting out before things get worse, and drove away looking defeated. But instead of leaving town, I parked 3 blocks away, circled back through the woods, and hid in my own basement with surveillance cameras rolling. Right on schedule, Karen arrived with her accomplices. She tried the master key. It jammed halfway. It stuck, she hissed. From my monitor, I watched her grab a crowbar and break the back door open. They spread through my home, whispering, searching, photographing. When she reached my bedroom closet, she gasped. There sat a cardboard box labeled evidence, FBI training materials. Inside were fake narcotics and mock evidence forms, realistic props from police training. Her eyes blazed with triumph. I found it. He's been hiding drugs, she screamed. They took pictures, buzzing with excitement. Then Karen dialed 911. This is Karen Douglas, HOA president, she declared proudly. We've discovered stolen FBI materials in a resident's home. Exactly as I'd planned. 15 minutes later, a county patrol car pulled up with lights flashing. Neighbors poured outside, phones ready to film my arrest. The driver's door opened, and I stepped out, in full county sheriff's uniform. Karen froze. Her clipboard slipped from her hands. Ma'am, I said evenly, I'm Detective Blake Turner, County Sheriff's Department. I understand you reported federal evidence found on these premises? Her voice barely came out. You're a cop. Yes, ma'am. Assigned to Operation Silent Watch, a federal task force investigating HOA civil rights violations. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto my couch. Karen Douglas, I said, taking out my handcuffs. You are under arrest for breaking and entering, evidence tampering, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and filing false reports. Her accomplices froze. Robert tried to run, but was tackled by Agent Miller outside. Janet burst into tears. The jammed master key gleamed in my front door like poetic justice. By nightfall, the story had gone national. News trucks filled the street. Cameras rolled as agents collected evidence. That evening, the Maplewood Grove Community Center was packed again, but this time, federal agents stood at every exit. I stood before 70 stunned residents. For 6 months, I lived among you as part of a federal investigation into HOA abuses. What happened here wasn't about community safety. It was about control. Gasps filled the room. Behind me, a map lit up with red dots marking other neighborhoods Karen had consulted for. She weaponized rules, intimidated homeowners, stole money through fake fines, I said. But that ends tonight. When I announced that restitution funds would return every illegal dollar, the crowd erupted in applause. Martha Evans asked softly, how do we make sure this never happens again? By electing leaders with transparency and courage, I replied. Fear only wins when good people stay silent. Karen pled guilty to racketeering and civil rights violations, facing 20 years in federal prison. Her assets were seized. The HOA was dissolved by court order. Tom was appointed interim chair under federal oversight. When someone asked if I'd be leaving now that the case was closed, I smiled. No, I'm staying right here. From now on, this neighborhood deserves real protection. The applause was thunderous. As the room emptied, Tom approached. When did you know she'd hang herself? I thought for a moment. The moment she decided I was her enemy. People like Karen can't stop themselves. Give them enough rope, and they'll always find a way to hang themselves. The master key, once a symbol of her absolute power, now sat locked away in an FBI evidence locker. Exhibit A in the case that changed HOA law across the country. As I walked home down the quiet, lamplit street, I realized something unexpected. I'd come to Maplewood Grove as an undercover detective, but I was staying as a neighbor, someone who helped his community remember what freedom truly feels like.